was an error loading your app. So I don't know. But if everyone can hear me, it means that we're good to go. Is everyone doing okay today?
Yes, sure, I'm ready.
Okay, so we're ready. And today we're talking about the media, which is kind of, well, an interesting topic because what exactly, does it mean? I think that's the first question we should try to kind of ask each other and try to understand ourselves. When you hear the word media, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? What do you understand as being the media? Denise, what about you? What do you think? What is the media?
Media is always throughout information delivered to people. So all communications way like TV, internet, other electronic networks, radio, magazines, newspapers, even books, or some probably rare things like vinyl discs or even film. I don't know how it's right. Not magnet. And other way information can be delivered to people.
Okay, so this transfer of information, that's what you understand as media.
Yes, but not in material meaning, but as a common idea of way how information delivered to people. It's not only about material representation, like a disk or like computer screen or like something else. It's a whole process from creation of some information, interpretation, shaping, and so on, and even perception by end user.
Okay. And Elia, what about you? What about you? What do you think when you hear the word media? What does it mean to you? Is it Denise's definition? Is it something else? Explain to me. What do you think when you hear the word media?
So when I hear the word media, I don't know why, but I think about newspapers first of all. Now, of course, media is much more wider, and I think that Denise's definition is almost perfect. Yes, but I don't know why. Maybe I am a bit older, or maybe um, um, a bit, I don't know, old fashioned. But I think about newspapers first. Then of course, internet came to my mind and everything connected with media. But when I hear the word media, I think about newspapers.
Okay. All right. When I hear media, I think, like Denise said, I think about this information. I think about news. I think about entertainment too. And I don't know, I somehow think that the two are connected. Entertainment and news. That's kind of my definition of media. And I don't know if it's the right definition or not, but it seems to me like that's kind of a growing trend of what we expect to be entertained with and informed with at the same time. And I don't know, I think there's kind of a fine line between where the information and entertainment meets, or one exceeds the other. And I think that it seems like in today's day and age there is so much information available. Because I mean, look at the internet, for example. The internet has revolutionized the way that we get information. And it seems to me that, especially in the last couple of years, we see a big difference in the way that media is working. Because, we used to have television and films and, newspapers, but now we've got this internet, and there's so much information that's available on the internet that we've kind of got a problem here in 2018, don't we? I mean, look at what was going on with the elections in the US and how the US, certain people are accusing Russia of interfering with American elections. How? By using computers. And, you wonder a bit too, I mean, how is it that we're able to understand the information that's out there and just really responsibly use it? I think that's a very good sort of question we should be asking when it comes to media. So getting back, without going off to too many tangents, getting back to the definition of media, when I hear the word, I think of information and I think of entertainment. And again, trying to find the balance between the two. So let's talk a little bit more about media. We kind of gave our definitions of what we define as media. But what kind of media do you use? Elliot, what kind of media do you use? Do you use computers or the television? What kind of media do you use?
Who made that question?
To Elia. To you.
Okay. So most of all, I use, of course, internet. I think for 90%. Last time I used internet.
Okay, so primarily you're an internet user. That's your primary source of media information.
Yes, then comes television, then come my loved newspapers and magazines. I still read magazines because I like them.
Okay, so would you say it's more news, entertainment? What would you say for you?
The magazines, of course, the entertainment. Just I like beauty magazines. I just like to buy the paper ones instead of just looking in gadgets different, because it is pleasant for me to keep the magazines in my hand. I don't know what is it. I think maybe some psychological things kept there inside of these feelings, but still it is so. And what else? And the last, I think, radio, because when I'm driving, I listen to radio, and it is also part of media.
Hey, hang on. Okay, my microphone is kind of muted. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when it comes to radio, that's another very good example, because that's something that we do listen to so much, especially when we're in the car. I think that people who maybe don't even watch the news or read newspapers, they're still listening to the radio. And maybe it's not even in your own car. Maybe it's just in a public place if you're at a store or I mean, these are things that you do here. So that's a good point. Radio, definitely, too. But you're saying that internet is the #1 source of media information for you. Denise, what about you? What sources of media do you use?
Of course, #1 is internet, because now the most previously popular way is migrated to internet. So most of magazines I read or radio are also presented on internet, and there are most simple way to listen internet radio or to read some electronic version of magazines or newspapers, something else. So #1 is internet. Sometimes I use newspapers, but in some specific situation, like in abroad or something else, where I can find not familiar for me newspapers, something like a presentation of another culture or something else. Of course, if this newspaper is in English, and I can understand it.
What do you mean?
Sorry?
Oh, what do you mean in English? Oh, you mean
yes, no. Abroad, I found English newspapers even in Tunisia. So it's very interesting, because it's a really local newspaper, but part of tirage is on English. Next, Some years ago, one of my hobby was radio. I experiment with using big antenna to catch some 5A radio stations, and now it's transformed only listening some small radio stations throughout internet. And I'm not sure that all of them have real radio broadcasting. And I think that's all. I can't remember any communication media. I look at Wikipedia definition, and a funny thing that there are social media also exist. It's not about only social networks, but about real communication. So social media as a real communication, it's important part too.
Yeah, absolutely. Social media is another topic altogether, which we can talk about. We'll talk about that a bit too, because that's definitely part of this media that we are discussing. When it comes to the kinds of media I use, I think, yes, internet is definitely also my number one source of news, and probably, well, I don't know, entertainment, maybe to a certain extent. I also do watch the news on television every night and watch programming that's available on TV as well. So I don't know. I think I haven't been completely internetized, if that's a word you can use. I listen to the radio in the car. Absolutely. They get information from there. I think that this is an interesting point too. And this is something that I definitely have observed, is that there is different information that is available on different sources of media. And of course, I mean, that seems pretty straightforward or logical that, yeah, okay, they're different news outlets and they're going to give you different information. That's fine. But then I see, for example, where I was living, there was the news on television, and the news was the national broadcast. It wasn't a local broadcast. And so it was whatever the national broadcaster decided that was relevant for their editorial policy and what they wanted the entire country to see. So if there was a big story, that was happening to be some, well, I don't even know, some festival or something like that in one city, then it was going to be on the nightly news. But if you looked at, for example, I don't know, maybe some major car accident, well, maybe they decided that it was going to be national news, maybe not. And so you didn't kind of get that information. And you wouldn't find that information. You wouldn't find out about it. If you were, some little grandmother or grandfather that just gets all their news from the news, watching the nightly news at 7 p.m. or whatever time it comes on, you wouldn't find out about this because they didn't decide to put it on the news. Whereas if you're reading the internet, you see, oh my gosh, there was a terrible car accident just, I don't know, a few kilometers from where I live. And you think, well, how could that have not been on the news? And again, this is, I think, the reason why we see so many people that are getting information from the internet. I know that in Moscow, what was it, a couple of months ago, there was some sort of terrible smell, and people were complaining about this terrible smell in Moscow, and it was all over the internet, and people were going, what is it? What is it? And then because people were talking about it, you get that information around. Whereas elsewise, if you're just tuning into a set broadcast, you're not going to necessarily get all that information. So yeah, I would say that I get a lot of information from the internet. I will watch some series or films or something like that on the computer, but I'm also watching the news, and I like to see what information people want to give me, and I use that to seek out the information that maybe I want to find. So I think there's a good balance that I've kind of come up with that. And again, radio, same thing. You listen to something on the radio, maybe they don't give you the whole story. And I like the ability to, type it in on the internet and look it up. For me, that's a priceless tool for someone who enjoys getting information. I remember growing up as a child, I used to sit with encyclopedias and look things up randomly. My sister would be watching TV, some cartoon, and I would just pick up a encyclopedia and, watch if I'd already seen that cartoon several times because it's a repeat. The same thing they want to show you over and over again. I decided to look something up. So yes, the internet is definitely a tool, a media tool, entertainment tool. And, I think we're going to see a lot of changes and a lot more maybe reaction from more traditional sources of media, which we already are seeing. If you look at major news channels and what have you, newspapers, magazines, they have their social media presence. They say, follow us on this, send us your ideas, send us your footage. And we see more of that interaction. So I think we're probably going to see a lot more of that. But again, it's maybe an issue of responsibility on so many different parties to keep that all in balance, which gets us to our next question. Let's get into trust of the media. Okay. Would you say that you trust the media, Denise? What do you think? Do you trust the media?
This is very different from what kind of media, what source of media. Because I'm usually not trust TV news, only some general narrative, but not some facts and interpretations. I usually trust some blogs I read because I know much about these people, about his opinions and his way to thinking and so on. So it's very different from sources. I usually try to find a root source of some news, but it's not possible or sometimes need much time. I can say that I choose all media, but I have few sources whom I choose in common cases.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. I mean, it definitely depends on the source. Absolutely. Elia, what about you? Do you trust the media?
Mostly I don't trust the media because I think that especially last time and maybe many years before it was so, but I haven't understood that before. I didn't understand that before. That I think that news are the part of entertainment, also the part of the game. So I don't trust the news. I always try to get as much information as possible if the question is important for me from different sources, and try to create my own opinion, maybe according to the facts I know, and mostly I think according to my feelings. That is so female attitude.
Okay. Denise?
Small comment. Yes, Elia chose her intuition.
Interpretation.
Intuition, the incorrect.
What do you mean?
Oh, I try. I find yes pronunciation, but I can't reproduce it. Intuition.
Intuition.
Intuition. Yes.
Intuition. Yes, intuition.
Intuition. Is it right? Intuition is the right pronunciation or not? Because I found transcription and there is something strange.
Can you write it down?
Yes, good. Thank you.
Can you type it in? Hang on, let me just check. See, is it intuition? Intuition. Denise?
Yes. Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
Please repeat pronunciation. I try to understand.
Intuition.
Intuition.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Like intuition. Okay, so yeah, trusting the media. I don't know. I know that everyone has their agenda and everyone has their interests. And, you know, if you want to tell a story or if you want to sell something or if you want to get your clicks or if you want to get advertisers, you know, everyone has got these motives behind giving information. I think they're, or maybe even promoting a political agenda. There's always going to be something, and I think we've always got to be aware of that. We can't necessarily always be certain of what these motives are or who is behind them, but I think that it's a safe thing to understand that they always exist and that we need to be clever about listening to information and researching information and processing it all. So that's my kind of just take on that whole sort of thing. Let's get then into that question of interests. All right, what interests do the media have? What do you think, Elliot? What interests do the media have?
I think that the most the aim of the whole media and that the whole process is to how is it in English? Влиять. What is it for?
Reflect on something.
Influence, even
Oh,
that
influence. Yeah, influence is a much better idea. Yeah.
Yes, influence the people, the society. It is the aim of mass media. It is the aim of marketing. So in this thing, I think that they are very close. That's why I'm based on intuition. Why? Because it is very difficult to learn the intuition, and especially female intuition and female way of thinking. So, and if you don't know the way of thinking of some part of the society, it becomes more difficult to influence. So I think that's why sometimes maybe the female behavior seems to maybe it seems to be stupid, but it is more difficult to influence, and that is the strong point of that way of thinking. Because I think yes, the aim of media is first of all to influence and to make people and society to think in this way or in that way as it is convenient to the people who pay for that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Like I was saying, you know, interests and goals of certain things. I mean, trust. I don't know. Trust is a really difficult word. I don't think I trust institutions of any kind. There are certain people that I trust, but no, institutions, it's a different sort of thing. You've always kind of got to be smart and cautious, I think, about anything. That's just my sort of personal opinion. I think that, you know, maybe there's circumstances when institutions will present themselves as like a source, the best source of information or the most watched source of news or something like that. And anytime I hear something like that, I think, well, I don't know about that. But again, that's my sort of issue of trust. I don't trust institutions. I trust individuals. That's maybe my sort of thing. What about bias in the media? Do you think that the media is biased? Denise, do you think the media is biased?
Sorry, I was mute. Bias is
bias is when maybe how do we bias? So that there is a certain goal or interest or preference the media has about something that maybe, for example, if there is a protest in the center of the city called, I don't know, Johnsville, all right, that the media is going to say that these protesters are, I don't know, they're they're rebels, they're terrorists, or something like that. Okay, and so that's what they're going to say. But they're not going to say, they're not going to objectively say that they're just protesters. They're going to give an opinion. They're going to maybe influence, as Elliot was saying, influence. That's definitely the right word. Influence what people think about this protest. Whereas, let's say there's some sort of alternative media source, like say all over their internet pages and everything else. You've got a grassroots organization that say in this so-called Johnsonville town city where they have this protest. Maybe they're protesting against them tearing down all of these historic trees that have been a part of the community since it was established and something like that. So they're trying to protect the original heritage of the city. So like they're protectors of nature and ecology and this. So like that's what they present themselves as. But the media is saying that they're terrorists because they're protesting in the center of town. So
understand you. Yes, to my mind, most media is already base. Yes. Because most media have founders or should work for money throughout subscription or advertisement and should get big auditory. So usually own source of media will be based, but question is about how much. One thing is some opinion or probably some color nuances in description of situation, or completely changing like fake news or silence about some fact. That was a good example. There was many protests in two weeks ago in Russia, I remember, but no one news in official newspapers or on TV. There are only few medias in internet make reports or photos from this event. So yes, usually most media is based, but not all of them change a real situation generally. It's only nuances. But yeah, part of media can try to create his own reality, which is not linked to real facts.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely true. What about you, Eddie? What do you think? I'm seeing your message here, prejudgment. What else could you say? Maybe something to, bias is maybe not exactly a perfect synonym, but you could say something like that, like having your bias, being prejudgmental, not quite being very objective. That's another way to say, if you say that you're objective, it means that you are open to understanding, whereas if you're not objective, you are definitely having these instances of prejudgment, I would say. But what about you, Elliot? What do you think? Do you think there's bias in the media?
Yes, thank you very much for explanation of the difference of these words. As for me, I've heard and met for the first time that very word bias in the material you've sent before. So a really interesting new word. Thank you very much. And as far as I understood, it's a rather commonly used word.
Yeah, it's a very popular. Bias is a very popular word that we hear when we're talking about media bias, and I mean it's a very strong thing to think about, to really analyze. Yeah.
Yes, I think it is the reason that why it is so popular, because I think that mostly media biased or bias. Yes, is it correct to use bias?
Yeah, media is biased, or you can talk about media bias as a noun, for example.
Okay. So media is, I think, biased a lot, and I think especially in Russia, but I think in the USA too, and in all other developed countries also, and not even developed. So I think yes, the media is very biased. That is my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a fair opinion. I mean, like I was saying, interests and goals that you have, I mean, that's pretty much, I think we understand that in today's day and age, more or less, depending. I mean, I think and everywhere in the world, really, it's also true. I mean, for the most part, maybe North Korea isn't exactly so open to criticizing whatever they're told, but I think that you do see, and maybe in China too, there's a bit of a crackdown on that sort of thing. But even still, I mean, there is so much information that's available thanks to the internet, and people are really able to maybe see that bias now more than ever before. And maybe if you look at certain countries and where they have more control over the internet, you can see that maybe they see that it's something that they have to worry about. So yeah, it's a changing world. It's definitely a changing world. What can you do to spot, like as Denise was saying, the so-called fake news? Fake news. What can you do to spot it? What do you think, Elia? What can you do to spot fake news?
Actually, I'm not very interested in news in general. I don't know why, because maybe because I live in my small um, society, and nothing happens around me, so that can strictly change something. So about fake news, I also take it like part of entertainment. I don't take them serious, so they exist. Sometimes they're funny, but I never how is it called? I never take them serious. So I think they exist just like a
Oh,
part of entertainment.
okay. All right. That's an interesting comment. Entertainment. You see it as entertainment. Denise, what about you? Fake news. What do you do to spot fake news?
Mm, mm, what is the question about? My opinion
Fake
about
news.
fake
Yeah, I mean,
news,
like when
or
you're getting information on the internet, you're reading an article or something. How do
to
you
my
know that
mind,
that article? Yeah.
yes, to my mind, fake news is some reincarnation of rumors, because uh, most people want to get some information which is not only abstract fact, but change his mode and um, mm, is influence emotionally on people. So fake news is mostly about this. And to me, in most cases, no problem to filter out fake news. Only one thing, sometimes interesting for me, it's influence of people. There are many fake news in some mostly discussion and science topics like genetic modifications or artificial intelligence or something else. And in that cases, fake news can change mass mind and probably affects in some later events, only from this position. And for me, it's no problem because it's very simple to filter out. It's very emotional and usually no, not necessary to check the facts. It's very simple to detect.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to hear. I don't know. I always consider the source of the news. I mean, if it's some website that's like real news 424 or something like that, I always kind of think, okay, that's probably not necessarily been checked. But yeah, I mean, you always, even if it's from a reputable source, you always want to know who is it that's writing it and what is the underlying story. I don't know. I'm always ready to do more research. So if I read an article and I think, hey, wait, I'm always willing to look it up and read it someplace else too. And I think that what we see a lot of today too, which is also very worrisome. So there's a lot of copying and pasting of the same information on different places. Anytime I see copying and pasting, that to me says, okay, I don't know. For some reason, I always get very suspicious when I see that. If I see the same thing in different places, I think that's a little bit odd. So I'm a person who likes to do my own research, and that's pretty much my way to filter out this so-called fake news. It's getting my own news or finding my own news or my own research on certain things. What is the last piece of news that you have read or watched or listened to lately? Can you tell us a bit about the topic? Ellie, let's start with you. You say you don't watch the news much. It's not really your thing. So tell me, what can you do? You have an answer to this question?
As far as I said that I'm not very interesting in news. So yes, sometimes I can only even miss very popular news, and I can get news from very strange situation. For example, when I met um, school meeting at my my daughter's class, I knew some shocked news about behavior of some teenagers in some city and some school. Uh, I hear that
Is that the
same.
one? Is that the one with that fight that took place? Where was it?
It was, yes, something. I'm not sure
I
about
think it
this.
was it was something that was terrible. It was one of those things, and it's like, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me! How can something like that happen?
Yes, that was something terrible with the situation in some city, in some school, and then parents offered to discuss the problem. But I know my school, I know the kids that study there, and I absolutely sure that it is absolutely impossible in our school and in our class. So I don't know. So for me, it was funny to discuss that. And it was, and it's one point. And another point I mentioned for myself, that I was shocked that all the countries speaking about that, and I even haven't heard about that. So I don't know whether it is good or not, but still it is so. And the latest news I know about the situation all around me, that it was a great snowfall in Moscow, and I got know that from Instagram from my friends that who is living in Moscow. So that is the latest
Okay,
news.
all right, okay, Denise, what about you? Latest news that you've read or seen, impressions, how was it reported?
Yes, latest news. I'm mostly interested in news about technology, about science, and so
Okay, that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine.
yes, and most interesting news last that was Falcon Heavy Launch is the most hard-weight rocket nowadays, which exists now. Uh, this launch was successful. And it was very impressive I can't remember this word, live translation about this launch. Next, of course, I'm look at the news about snowfall in Moscow because uh, I'm periodically visit office where I work from, and sometimes I should spend a lot of time if bad weather or if subway is overcrowded or something else. So I check transport conditions, and I think that's all. There was many different small news according science or something else, but I'm not sure that it will be interesting to list it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. No, that's interesting. That's fair. I mean, that's again, what kind of interests you have. That's the sort of news that you're gonna want to read. So that's, I mean, absolutely a fine sort of thing. And that Moscow snow was pretty much everywhere, all over the Russian media. But I was really interested because, or really, it was interesting because it wasn't on the news where I was in Croatia. And I thought that, well, geez, I mean, those are amazing pictures of all that snow, and everyone, all my people on my social media and Instagram, they're posting photos and talking about this school that was kind of like optional for children and things like that, you know, like this whole Sabyanin thing saying, hey, you can go to school if you want. And people are going, what does it mean? You know, and there are like 5 children in a class or something like that, which was very kind of funny. But it wasn't all over the news. It wasn't on the news at all in Croatia. And I thought, oh, that's kind of disappointing because it was such a big story in Moscow, in Russia. But okay, I mean, it was on, I think, there were some international links too, so it definitely did get the coverage, but definitely not the same way that it did in Russia, which was kind of unfortunate because that snowfall was absolutely amazing, guys, really. I mean, that's just, wow. Let's think. The last media piece that I saw, and this is when I was arriving at the airport in New York City, so I was in the process of, you know, making a flight and everything else and walking through a huge terminal at JFK airport. So that was, maybe my attention wasn't completely there, but I glanced as I was walking down all of these gates. And of course, at the airport, they had a CNN that was tuned onto the television. And the reporters were talking about something about Trump. And I don't even know what it was. And I don't think it even matters at this point in time, because the way that they were talking, it was so condescending, and the way that they had things written on the screen, the way they were quoting him, again, was in such a way that it was interesting because, you know, I have spent so much time in the airports in my life, really. And usually the only people that would ever watch CNN were business people. I mean, that was really kind of the contingency of people who were watching the news in the airport. It was people who were on business trips. They were, you know, executives or representatives, need to keep on top of that sort of things. Well, things have changed. And getting back to what we were talking about in the beginning, you know, media as information and media as entertainment. Again, I'm telling you guys, I see a lot more entertainment in the media, because this was fascinating to me. Sitting in that airport, almost everyone that was sitting in the proximity of those television screens, they were all watching. Okay. And people were rolling their eyes, or, like, oh yeah, okay. And so, but it was entertainment. Whether a person watching this program likes President Trump or doesn't like President Trump, what it all came down to was that this piece, this media, this coverage was entertainment. And everyone was watching. Maybe they were on their smartphones at the same time, their tablets or something like that. But people were either actively or passively watching this entertainment presentation of information. So again, that's one of those things, how is it reported? What's the impression? That's my impression. My impression was that this was not news information. This was news entertainment. And again, we see how things are definitely changing. At least I see. What about the constant availability of information that we have? This is, the internet. Do you think that things have gotten out of hand because of the internet? And I'm talking about maybe this inaccurate fake news information that we were talking about, but also maybe like the overload, that there's too much information available. Would you say there's too much information available today? Denise, what do you think? Is there too much information available?
To me, it differs from how to people get this information. The most big change is appearing some solution like infinity scrolling, like in Facebook. If you open Facebook, you can scroll page down and get more and more articles, pictures, and so on. And this is rather a good thing, idea how to took people attention, how to uh, mm, make people spend more time in Facebook, but it's a bad thing if we try to talk about getting information. So if usually if I want to find some news, I use small digest. And after I got a list of actual information, I find what I want to dig about and find some more detailed sources and different opinions. Uh, but really for who use some aggregators or took most part of news from Facebook, this is not well controlled flow of information. And in such case, yes, it's a problem.
Okay.
The same thing, yes. 12 years ago, some people also have ability to buy, for example, 10 or most newspapers and got the same information flow. Now time it's only simpler, but there is no big differences. This question is about way to how to get information, how to select information.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, how you select it, how you process it, what you're choosing to read, what you're
And
understanding. Yeah.
a small idea about information as entertainment. Uh, Generally, all information we have is entertainment, except some manuals or science articles. Because if this whole thing was not entertainment, most people reject and not to get or read or watch this. So now time, the most part of mass information is have a big part of entertainment. And that's not bad or good. It's only some butter, probably, or some feature of how to present information.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's absolutely fair. What about you, Elia? What do you think? Is it an information overload? What do you think with the
Uh,
internet and
I think that there can't be too much information because, as I agree with Denise that, and many years ago and now, useful information, valuable information is very difficult to find out, and you should have some sources to get that interesting and valuable information. But on another hand, if you are very uh, particular, you are a particular searcher of the information, the truth, I don't know, the things you need. Nowadays, if you are careful, you can find that very information you need. But you need just to be careful and to be more attentive. On the other hand, there is a lot of information, and we spend lots of time wasting time. We're wasting time, and we don't value that information and can't use it in proper way. So I think that's the problem nowadays.
yeah, that is another good fair point. Again, I don't know. I mean, I think that balance is good and also I don't know, controlling, regulating. That makes sense. I think that maybe today, and this is something because I remember growing up how I used to dream. I had this little device that you could use. There was a modem inside, a dial-up modem, and you could plug it into the wall and get your email, and that was pretty much the only thing you could get. get your email and some news and weather updates and maybe stock tickers or something like that. And that was basically it. But I was just thinking how neat it would be if I didn't have to plug it into the phone line in order to download it. You know, I was like, how wonderful it would be if there was always that information available, you know? And sure enough, I mean, today, okay, your average cheapest smartphone has got far more capabilities than this big, I mean, it wasn't that big. It was maybe a handheld device, but it was quite heavy and bulky. But I just think like back then, I really thought that life would be so much better if we could always be online. And now that we are, and now that you can get breaking news updates, you can get digest updates, you can get email notifications, social network notifications, everything like that. I just think that maybe yes, maybe it is a bit too much. Maybe we need to take a step back and just wonder, do we really need to have all this information? Because yes, being informed is very important. But then we also have to understand that the people informing us, many of these people, whether it's a website that wants to get clicks, or a YouTube channel that wants to get views, or a television network that wants to have its ratings so it gets advertisers. I mean, there's so much that's being done to have us watch or read or listen or what have you, that maybe, you know, there's a time that we can just take a breath, you know, take a breath and keep informed, definitely keep informed, but then keep informed in balance. That's just kind of my outlook, because sometimes I think that, yes, I am completely attached to my mobile phone and it is not good. It really isn't. I mean, I was just on several plane rides, and the last leg of my plane ride, there was free internet, but just for social media. And I just thought, well, my goodness, how before I could survive an airplane without a 5-6 hour airplane trip, you know, even 13 hours if you're talking, for example, Moscow, Los Angeles, without having any internet. But now it seems like people are so dependent on this internet that, again, I have to ask the question, do we really need that? You know, once upon a time when people flew on airplanes, this is, okay, for example, in the United States, in Russia, I don't know how there's Wi-Fi on domestic planes. I mean, there might be. I don't know. I haven't flown domestically in Russia for years, so I used to take the train more than anything else. But for example, I mean, once upon a time when people were on airplanes, they used to look out the window and look at the city that they were flying into or flying out of. And today, no, today we've got internet and we've got, the news and movies that are on the screens in front of us. And I just really look at that and see that. And I think, wow, how things have changed so much. And maybe it is good to just kind of take a step, take a breath, take a step back, take a breath, or something like that. Let's get to our last question. What are your predictions for the future of the media? Denise, what are your predictions about the future of the media?
Who made the question?
For Denise. Denise first, and then Elia.
Okay. In my mind, media was not changed generally on last probably 100 years. Only appear some new technical abilities, but it's not about idea of media. So generally, most of properties, I think, would be preserved. But only one interesting direction is appearing using artificial intelligence like a helper. Such system can understand your interest, can remember most important topics, can analyze the current situation. For example, is it travel or some work time or something else, and should filter out the news and some events to help get only important and interesting things. Some kind of such abilities we already have in most Android smartphones. There are Google Now. It's some kind of artificial intelligence helper. And also this platform can provide news by request, news about some topics or something funny news or something else. It's only first step and it's not works well for all cases, but I think in near future this will be a very interesting direction and will be many possibilities to use such technologies.
Yeah, okay. Lots of opportunities. Elia, what about you? What do you think? Future of the media.
I don't know exactly because I'm not so acquainted with technical parts of some gadgets and things like that. But I think it would be something used with personal information, with database working. I think that marketing and mass media, they will analyze people's behavior. They will try to predict different ways of future behavior, and I think the aim will be just to know about everything about almost each person, because even nowadays we know that if you want to know, it is possible to know almost every step of this or that person, because Google keeps everything. And I think they will try to even to predict and to guess people's thinking. I think that will be the goal. That will be the aim. Something like, that was a gadget called Melophone in the old fantastic movie from Soviet Union, Guests from Future. I think maybe some years later, someone will invent something like that.
Yeah. That's getting again a little bit even further with media and defining media. Google, that's a great example. I mean, there's this Google Voice which you can link to your regular phone number, and you can make all your calls through this, and it basically keeps track of everything. So they've got voice recognition technology, and they are able to type out the phone messages that you have. I mean, it's absolutely incredible, this technology. I mean, that's something like that. When it comes to the media, I don't know. My prediction is that we're going to see a lot more of this integration. You know, something like you're talking about, like with this Google, with tracking what people are reading, watching, what they're interested in, what they're liking. Again, more of this interactive entertainment. I think that's my sort of prediction for the future of the media. And well, that's, I think, all we have time for today with this topic, but it was a very interesting discussion that we had. Any suggestions for the next time?
I have two suggestions. First, it's we can speak about hobbies, different hobbies, how to organize life to have time to hobbies and work something.
Hobbies, okay.
And another one, it's about probably remote working. This is very uh, much discussed topic now, and for many professions, there are ability to work remotely appears, but
Wait, what is the second one?
working remotely, like
Working
you,
remotely.
yes.
Oh, like that.
No, for me it's very interesting thing also, because most time I work in office and I prefer work in contact with my teammate. But in some cases I'm should spend much time to go to office, and it's not good for every cases. So what
Okay, well,
two topics?
Ellie, what do you about that? What do you think about working remotely?
Yes, I quite agree. I think very interesting and very useful.
Okay. Okay, let's then do working remotely.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Great job. Then guys, until next time, have a great evening, have a great week, and talk to you all soon. Thanks for joining us with Conversation Club.
Thank you, Daniela.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.